I think there are several challenges to CAR T-cell therapy. One is the logistics, although that is a low hurdle, I would say. You need to have access to apheresis facilities. You need to have an intensive care unit. You need to be able to freeze and hold CAR T-cells. You also need an inpatient unit that's educated in the administration of these products and the management of toxicities. It means a lot of education of nursing staff, pharmacy staff, etc. You need access to tocilizumab for management of cytokine release syndrome. And you need all physicians, nurses, and caregivers to be comfortable identifying cytokine release syndrome and neurologic toxicities and treating patients accordingly. So as far as other hurdles, I think this is something that ultimately will not have to be performed only at high-level quaternary care academic medical centers. I think it can be administered safely and effectively as long as a center can apherese, store products, have an intensive care unit, and is trained in the management of these toxicities. I think more medium-sized centers that meet those criteria will be eligible to administer this type of product going forward as more centers develop the steep learning curve that it takes to give this new therapy. I think one of the other major hurdles is financial. And right now, this is a product that's largely administered as an inpatient. The way inpatient drug costs are billed is very different than outpatient. And it's estimated that administering this very expensive product, which also requires inpatient management, highly expensive medications to control cytokine release syndrome and tocilizumab, occasional ICU care, management of subspecialists, that this is a very expensive inpatient process. And centers are estimated with commercial drug to probably be losing over $200,000 per patient in the current payment model. That won't work. And centers won't agree to administer a product that they're going to take a financial bath on every patient that they administer this to. So I think that's part of a limiting factor right now. Now, what can help that? Overall reform in how this is reimbursed to hospitals. That's number one. Number two is outpatient administration. And so if this can be safely administered to outpatients, then the drug is billed differently to insurers, reimbursed better, and then it is not an inpatient capitated DRG model where that drug is also counts against the cost of their inpatient stay, their ICU stay, other medicines administered, and other elements of inpatient care. So if the drug can be administered as an outpatient, and even if patients are ultimately readmitted on day 4 or 5 for management of toxicity, that would be a much more fiscally feasible approach for a hospital setting. I would say that both the Novartis drug and the Juno drug appear to have later onset of cytokine release syndrome and lower overall incidences and may be candidates for outpatient therapy. I think that the axicabtagene ciloleucel, which has a 94% incidence of cytokine release syndrome with a median onset of day 1, is less likely to be able to be administered at a large scale in the outpatient setting, just given the timing of the toxicity when it occurs. However, I think all of these products need to look at what are those biomarkers where you can identify low-risk patients who can be treated as an outpatient. We've already looked at this to some degree. We found that low tumor burden, lower LDH, lower baseline inflammatory markers and cytokine levels all correlate with lower risk of cytokine release syndrome. In the Novartis study of KTE-019, they treated close to a quarter of patients in that study as an outpatient and only needed to readmit a proportion of those patients with no severe adverse events reported due to outpatient administration alone. So I think payment reform is huge. Outpatient administration is another thing that will make it more convenient for patients, certainly make it more feasible for treating centers.